clerk's ready to get started. Okay, so this is the finance meeting of Tuesday, April 19th. If you could please call the roll.
Chair Du Bois,
Here.
Councilmember Philseth,
Here.
Councilmember Koo.
Here.
For the record, all present.
Great, thank you. The first item is oral communications for simply not on the agenda. I don't see any attendees. And we've let the public in, right? Okay. Let's move on to our action items. So we have 4 action items tonight. They're all on utility rates and fund transfers. And the first one is wastewater.
Good evening, Chair Du Bois, council members, Dean Batchelor, Utility Director. Tonight, utilities will be presenting, as the chair mentioned, 4 rates moving forward. And how would you like to take questions, Chair? Would you like it from each of the utilities, or would you like to wait to the very end?
I think we should probably do utility by
Okay.
utility.
By utility. Great. We'll do that. Okay, with that, then I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Belair. She is our acting senior resource manager that will be talking about water and wastewater rates. So Lisa.
Yes, good evening, council members. And I'm just going to share my screen. And what I'm going to do is go through the highlights for wastewater and water. Happy to answer any questions as I go. And just happy to delve into any of the other areas, but I'm going to just try to hit the highlights. Our proposal for wastewater really hasn't changed much since we came to you in February with the preliminary rate proposals. It's a 3% overall rate increase for the wastewater utility. We are requesting a transfer of $5.33 million from the CIP reserve to the operations reserve, and that is to pay for CIP projects with the funding that has been set aside in the CIP reserve. We are preparing for the treatment cost increases over the next several years, and this plan transfers $1 million from the operations reserve to the rate stabilization reserve in each year, 2025 and 2026, in order to be prepared for the debt service increases for treatment costs that primarily appear in 2027. The wastewater utility is experiencing reductions in revenue due to or associated with COVID, and the estimate is about $1 million. The one other thing is a primary reason for the wastewater increase is to do 2 things. One is continue towards a sustainable rate of main replacement for the wastewater utility, and also, as I mentioned, those increases coming for the treatment costs to be prepared for those. This is a chart of the operations reserve. You can see in the gray lines the minimum and maximum guideline range, and the red line shows the year-end balances in the operations reserve. And you can see that although it does dip below the target, the dotted gray line, it does remain within the guideline range throughout the forecast period over the next over the 5-year period, and towards 2027 it begins to come back up towards the target level. Actually, I wanted to show you the cost and revenue next. So the stacked bars are the costs, and you can see the light and dark blue show the treatment costs, and the operations cost, although they make up the bulk of the treatment costs, the dark blue, the capital and debt service costs are increasing the most. And you can see that large increase I was mentioning in 2027. To pay for the needed infrastructure at the treatment plant. The wastewater collection system costs are shown in the green and orange, and you can see that the green is the operations costs and the orange is the capital costs. Capital costs we're able to hold them relatively steady by utilizing the CIP reserve and putting a steady amount of funding into that reserve and then withdrawing it out to pay for the projects as needed, even though they occur The main replacement is occurring every other year. And then the red line shows the revenue, and you can see that it has dipped down a little bit, but with the rate increases and then the recovery, it's going up throughout the forecast period. You can see the proposed 3% in red, and then the 5% in each of the subsequent years. And that brings me to the recommendation slide, which is for the staff and the UAC to request that the Finance Committee recommend that the council adopt a resolution approving three things: the wastewater collection financial plan with the 3% increase, the 5.33 million from the capital improvements projects reserve to the operations reserve, and then the increase in the rates through the rate schedule amendments. So those are the key points I wanted to bring to your attention for wastewater, and I'd be happy to delve into any other areas or answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. I just want to check if there are any members of the public that want to speak on this item. And again, I only see Jonathan attending. So council members, if you have any questions, raise your hand or just speak up. Eric.
So yeah, what would the rate change be if we didn't move anything in and out of the reserve this year?
The change would be the same. The movement in and out of the reserve is to try to stabilize the balance in the operations reserve to make it a better presentation and better information for decision making.
Okay, but you wouldn't see a revenue change there or a different revenue increase this year?
No, that's really
Okay.
more of an administrative item to try to utilize the CIP reserve.
All right, thanks.
So just to, and is that Lydia?
Yes, it is. I'm sorry, I don't know how to get my camera to work.
Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, so what is it on the table 5, the chart that shows comparison with the other cities? What is Santa Clara, Los Altos, and Hayward doing that keeps their rates low? I mean, yeah, if you can help me understand.
This table?
Mm-hmm. Which table? Oh,
Is this table, I
Yeah.
use table 5. I'm not sure if this is what you're referring to. Yeah, so this is a table showing the different cities and the cities that have the same treatment plant as Palo Alto is Mountain View and Los Altos. There's a treatment plant that Redwood City and Menlo Park have that has had more recent upgrades. And Los Altos, even though it shares the same treatment plant, it has a lot of reserves, and so they actually don't pay for their collection system CIP through rates currently. They are funding their CIP through reserves. And then Hayward is part of a larger JPA, and I believe that they have some economies of scale.
I see. And it says that, it's at currently with the rates, we're at 28% lower than the average neighboring community, right?
Yeah.
With the rate changes, the increase then will be at 26. How do we keep it at a consistent above at 28 in the years to come? Is there a way to do that so that we're consistently at 28%?
Well, we don't know what our neighbors are necessarily going to do. We can't really project what our neighbors are going to do in terms of increasing their rates, but we have looked at Palo Alto's increase over the next 5 years. And with the rate increases that we are proposing, we would still remain below the comparison city average, this comparison city average on the residential side, with all the increases that Palo Alto is proposing. I do want to mention that on the non-residential side, for our commercial rates, we are a little bit higher than the comparison city average.
Okay.
I just didn't want to give you a skewed picture.
Thank you so much. So I was also looking at table 7, which is the proposed projected wastewater rates changes for FY 2023 to FY 2027. Previously in FY 2021 and 2022, there were the years of 26 and 27 where there was it's NA, which back then, if I remember correctly, it wasn't expected that there would be any more rate increases. So at this point, if we look at FY 2028, we can't say that there won't be any percent increase.
And no, that's correct. We can't say that. We
Okay.
will continue to bring the recommendations.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. That's it.
Thanks. Just to follow up on both of those. So I think Councilmember Philseth asked, if we didn't do the transfer, you said the rates wouldn't be changed. And we are doing that transfer to pay for capital projects, right?
Yes, this is in our reserve guidelines, we need to get council approval to transfer funds from one reserve to another. And so this is to just make sure that we have gotten the proper council approval in order to use those CIP reserve funds to pay for CIP projects.
Right. And then maybe I've just never noticed before, but when we take capital reserve funds, it seemed odd that we transferred into an operational budget. But that is a budget for capital expenses, not just operational expenses, right?
Yeah, great question. And it's currently, this is part of an effort to more actively use the CIP reserve. But currently all of the operations and capital, everything is really funded through the operations reserve. So we're kind of ironing out some kinks, but with accounting, but this is an effort to try to really show more active, proactive use of the CIP reserve in order to fund capital work with the capital dollars that we've set aside.
Yeah, it just seemed like maybe we should have like a working capital account, or just to be clear where the money's going.
Okay.
And then I also had a similar question about, like, particularly our partners in the wastewater plant. If you could just, like, again, Los Altos, Mountain View, so these increased operating costs, they're going to have to share in those proportionally, right?
Right.
But you said, so Los Altos has just reserved more funds over time for their capital. That's why their costs are lower.
That's one of the reasons. Los Altos, I don't know the history of it, but I just know that they have a lot of reserves, and that's how they're planning to pay for their CIP currently and over the next several years.
And then kind of the same question on Mountain View. Mountain View is higher, yet they're also a partner in our wastewater plant.
Yeah, I mean, each city has a different set of customers, a different size of customers. And so each city does its own cost of service study in order to develop the rates. And so it is hard to find another comparison that's exactly the same as Palo Alto with the same mix of residential and business customers in order to compare exactly. So those are some of the things that do change the rates across the cities.
Okay. And then the last question was, there was, again, you mentioned that operating costs are going up. Do you know how much of that is labor costs versus just other operational expenses?
It's primarily labor costs. I need to look up a number on that, but yeah, it's the primary driver is salaries and benefits.
And so the long-term increase, the 5% each year, is that also being driven by labor costs, or?
That's a part of it. That's a component of it. Yes.
Okay. Why don't we do a motion at the end of each utility? So can I get a motion for the wastewater rates and transfer?
Move the staff recommendation.
I'll second. Let's go ahead and vote. Eric,
Yep.
Lydia,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. Okay, so I think on to water. You want to pick it up, Lisa?
Yes, I'm just going to load the other presentation for water. For water. Sorry about this.
Surprised you by going fast. Huh?
Okay, so the proposal for water has changed a little bit since we came to you for the preliminary rates in February. The distribution increase that staff is recommending is 4%, and that is to pay for the distribution system needs, primarily seismic upgrades to reservoirs. There's one ongoing currently and two more during the rate cycle. Main replacement needs, and then also generator either purchase or rental lease for wildfires and emergencies. The San Francisco Public Utilities Commission has provided notice to Palo Alto that its rate will be increasing by 15.9%. And that is going to take the current rate of $4.10 per CCF up to $4.75 per CCF. And that is going to go to their commission for a vote on May the 10th. So we'll have confirmation at that point. And then what we will do is make sure that Palo Alto customers get notification of that charge, which is going to be a pass-through charge. And it will go into effect. Customers will have at least 30 days of notice of that increase. So that's that 15%, 15.9% on about half of the costs, and then the 4% on the other half of the costs. So the net total effect for Palo Alto customers is a 9% overall increase on the water side. The operations reserve for the water utility is at the maximum level. There are additional funds above the maximum that are considered unassigned, and those are going to be used for paying for all the needs of the utility, operations needs, capital needs. We are in a voluntary rationing situation due to the drought. So San Francisco has requested that system-wide reductions of 10%. So that's incorporated into this forecast. It's also a primary reason for their rate increase. So, because customers are going to use less water during this upcoming year, and because most of their costs are fixed, they need to spread those costs over a smaller number of units. And so the cost is going up. Another reason for their increase is debt service costs that they're expecting to increase more than they previously projected. On the distribution rate side, Palo Alto staff is proposing 4% in each, and no increase in 2027. Similar to the wastewater utility, on the water utility, we're making proactive use of the CIP reserve. And so you'll see that there is a transfer from the CIP reserve to the operations reserve proposed, and that's to pay for the CIP needs. And we're also making use of the funds in the rate stabilization reserve to mitigate the impacts of the drought. The costs and revenue projections are shown here. You can see the 9% overall increase in 2023. Revenue is shown in the blue line, and you can see it reduced in 2022, recovering in 2023, and then back to where we thought we would be in 2024. The costs are in the stacked bars. So you can see the capital costs in orange, the operations costs in green, and then the water supply, the commodity costs in blue. And this is the water operations reserve projections. You can see it's at the maximum right now at the end of 2021, and also projected at the end of 2022. And we're bringing it in line with the target level by the end of 2023. And then the operations reserve is projected to remain within the guideline range throughout the forecast, the rest of the forecast period. So the recommendation for the water utility is that staff and the Utility Advisory Commission request that the Finance Committee recommend that the City Council adopt a resolution approving the water utility financial plan, the 13.964 million transfer from the capital improvements project reserve to the operations reserve in 2022, and then increases to the water utility rates through the amendment of these rate schedules. So be happy to try to discuss any questions you have or feedback.
Okay, thank you. And just check with, see if the public, anybody in the public's here, and they are not. Any council members have questions?
Actually, I do.
Yep.
I wanted to find out, how does a customer know what is the meter size, because the rates are based on meter size. How I went out and looked at my meter, I couldn't figure it out. So there's the 5/8, the 3/4, the 1. How would we know what we have?
I'm not confident in that answer and wondering if,
Okay.
Sylvia, I see you turn your camera on.
Yeah,
Sylvia.
hi, this is Sylvia Santos, Water Gas Wastewater Engineering Manager. I'm not sure if you can tell by just looking at it. I'm not sure if there's a size somewhere you can see on the meter itself, but definitely if you call us, give us the address, we can look it up to let you know what size
Oh, okay.
of a meter you have.
So the size would be what it would be underground, and it's not, you won't see it then.
No, the meter is,
Oh, it's the meter.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Because I was looking at the rate table, table 2, right, on packet page 29. It has all the meter sizes and then also the rates. So if I knew what kind of meter size I had, I would be able to go straight to the rate and know what the type of increase it would be. But that's okay. So thank
Dean,
you.
I think Dean, you wanted to say
Oh,
something.
Dean, hi.
Yes, Vice Mayor Ku. So Dean Batchelor. So the meter itself is stamped on the body, on the sides of the size. On the body itself, it's made out of brass. So it'll say 1 inch, or it'll say 5/8, or it'll say 3/4. Or the dial itself should say on the top, if it's a 1 inch or a 3/4 or 5/8. And I think what you're asking about is that we consolidated the rates, the fixed rates, some years ago to combine the 5/8, 3/4, and 1 inch, which is mostly residential size meters. Larger meters, of course, then go to small businesses and commercials,
Okay.
if that
Thank you.
helps.
That does. I have never examined my meter as much, but I'll go back and look at it again. Also, on the two main costs that is that has increases. It states in the report, water supply cost and the cost of operating the distribution system. I read it a few times today, and I couldn't quite visualize how it's different. I realized that you also put examples there. Primarily, water supply costs is the cost of water delivered to Palo Alto, and the cost of operating is the system of pipes and pumps and reservoirs. But I couldn't quite figure out the difference on those two. It's still the pipes that's being delivered, that the water is delivered to Palo Alto. Or, so I guess I'm not figuring this out.
Great question. And I don't have the passage that you're referring to in front of me, but let me take a stab at it and then we'll see if it answers your question. But
Thank you.
I think what it's getting at is the cost that Palo Alto pays to San Francisco for the water that San Francisco delivers through its pipes to Palo Alto. And then versus the cost that once Palo Alto gets the water, then it goes through the pipe system, the distribution system within Palo Alto, and we have to maintain and keep in good shape those pipes in Palo Alto.
I see. Okay. Thank you for that, Lisa. Thank you. Okay. And it's good to hear that SFPUC have decided that it's going to be 15%. All they have to do is go to a vote. So we're not kind of waiting on whether it's 15 or the 25, right?
Yes, they have provided official notice that it's 15.9, but their commission could decide something different on May 10th when they meet.
Okay, 15.9. Okay, I thought it was 15.1. All right. Well, thank you.
You're
I think
right.
that's
It was a range from 15.1 to 25.1, but what
okay.
they provided notice was the 15.9.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
So a 9% increase is still pretty steep. And then, all our reserves seem to be maxed out. I didn't really see like a discussion at the UAC. I mean, could we use some of these reserves to smooth out these rate increases? It seems like we're going to go 99320. Did staff have any discussion about trying to smooth those out?
Yes, it's something that we've looked at internally. We could do that. We could put off the rate increase on the distribution side for a year or two. The problem or the advantage of that could be what you said, that it would be leading to a more steady increase, like something like 6 to 7% each year. But it means that the distribution increase would be a higher increase once we do it. Whether we wait a year or 2 years, it would be a larger distribution rate increase of 10 or 11, or I don't know an exact number, but a larger percent. We do not have a presentation of that.
But it would average out to 6 or 7 in the bill, is what you're saying.
That's a ballpark estimate, but yes.
Yeah. So why did staff decide not to do that, I guess?
Because if you look at the costs for the water utility, they are very large. And I know there's significant reserve amounts, but there's also really significant CIP spending. Like, for example, in 2022, when you combine the main replacement and the seismic reservoir upgrades and everything that's going on, it adds up to $25 million. So there's actually very large needs for funding in the water utility.
Right, but we would still have those funds, right? I'm not suggesting we don't do infrastructure upgrades. So I guess the reason our reserves are so full is we had some projects delayed. Is that right?
Yes, we did have some projects delayed.
And are we going to be able to expend the funds to catch up at any point in time? Or is it like hard to find, trained staff to be able to do these projects?
We're actually on schedule, and we just filled some vacancies in the water group. So far we have the resources now to bring the projects back on track.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand if we said we wanted to smooth out the rates, what is the risk, or what's the impact?
So in this coming year, we are projecting and expecting that customers will meet the call for conservation. So we're expecting lower revenues. We have these increases coming from San Francisco that we're passing through. But, I think the risk I'm thinking is mostly that we'll have to do a larger rate increase later on the distribution system. But I don't know if anyone else wants to add to my answer there. In the short term, we have reserves in the rate stabilization reserve, in the CIP reserve, and in the operations reserve that we can use in the short term to cover our needs, and then we could reevaluate in a year.
Dean, did you have a thought?
No, I was just going to add from what Lisa just mentioned is that, when we looked at that, I think that we saw as those rates increase in those further outlining years, that they're going to be greater than what we think is going to be. It's just an estimate that we wrote at 6, but what I was thinking is it's going to roll mostly like 8s, and I didn't think that we wanted to roll that high. So if we went ahead and did this and kept the rates at a lower rate, for at least for the next 4 to 5 years, then we'll be able to tell what the long term is going to be. So we didn't think about when we looked at it, like I said, that the increases were going to be higher in the outline areas than where they would be today.
So even though we're forecasting going back to 0, you're saying we probably won't. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. Yes.
Okay. But so why don't we adjust the forecast, I guess, because it's just so uncertain?
That's the thing with this, that, as Lisa mentioned, is that what I'm worried about is that I just don't know what the SFPUC is going to do. And, today it's in the 9 range, but what I wonder is it going to creep to the 25? And that, then at that point, we're going to see significant increases on the distribution side as well.
Yeah, and this one pie chart of where the cost increases are coming from, it's already
Yes,
60%.
60%. Yep.
But again, we also see pretty significant increase in operational costs as well.
Yes.
Eric, did you want to make a comment?
I'm just going to ask the question. You got a second scenario in here, which is the drought gets worse. What did you model for the second scenario on the drought?
In the second scenario, so keep in mind, I was not looking at San Francisco increases of 25% or other magnitude. I was looking at the distribution costs for Palo Alto, the distribution system costs primarily, and looking at how sensitive that is to increases in the drought worsening, basically. So I was looking at, instead of things kind of start getting back to normal in 2023 and then a recovery in 23 and then back to normal in 2024, I was looking at 20% rationing in 2023, recovery year in 24, back to normal in 25. And so from that perspective, it only made a difference of about 1% for Palo Alto's distribution rate increase. However, to underscore what Dean said, it may make a very significant difference in San Francisco's proposed increases. They have a balancing account that they're basically using up in 2022 and 2023 to mitigate the increases. So beyond that, if the drought worsened, the rate increases might be really more significant.
Everybody's got a reserve. Huh? So your main scenario assumed this is a drought year, but next year is back to close to a normal year.
Yes.
Okay. And your alternate scenario assumed that next year was also a drought year, but after that it goes back to a normal year.
Yes.
And in neither case did you model how SFPUC might respond.
Right.
I would assume if it's another drought year, SFPUC's rates are not going to stay low or stay flat.
That's right.
Okay, thanks.
And I know the the wastewater upgrade is a separate budget, but has staff had any discussions about it if we were to get to the point where we're creating potable water from wastewater? Do the funds for those upgrades have to come from the wastewater funds, or could they come from the water fund reserves?
Yeah, I think that's something that we've started to take a look at. And I think it depends on, what the results of the cost of service study is that looks at that.
Yeah, again, I mean, if these drought years continue and, we're looking at resilience, it starts to get interesting. You think about where the funds come from.
So Chair Du Bois, I think, as Lisa just noted, we don't necessarily have the answer tonight. Obviously, these rates from an enterprise perspective do need to find the nexus between the ratepayer and the investment that we're making. But I think your point is well taken, and we will, as staff, go back and continue to make sure that's part of our considerations as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, not this year, but future years, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any more?
No.
So, yeah, I'm not happy about it, but I understand the thinking. So I'll go ahead and make the staff motion.
Second.
And let's go ahead and vote. Lydia,
Yes.
Eric?
Yep.
Yep, now I'll vote yes. So thank you. I guess we'll move on to gas utility.
Good evening. Tonight I'll be bringing, Eric Kennison, Utilities Rates Manager, bringing to you the gas and electric. Let me share my screen. And so tonight, the proposal that we're bringing to you for gas is not changed from what we brought to you in the preliminary financial forecast time. So it's still a 4% overall rate increase in 2023. As part of this, we've, similar to what we're also seeing in electric, we've seen decline in sales due to COVID. And right now we're projecting that it starts recovering ideally towards the end of 2022 and into 2023. However, we're still curious to see how it will materialize between residential and commercial sectors and whether or not they will resume their previous levels respectively of usage. This proposal has future increases of about 4% for 24 through 26. So similar to what you've seen in the other utilities, we have the bar chart showing costs, projected costs and revenues over the next 5 years with, as I said, 4% rate increases projected throughout, leveling out a little bit in 2027 to about a 3%. And this drives around what we've seen in the way of ongoing operational cost increases of about 3%. Right now, we've been seeing some historically high gas market prices. So this 4% change at this point in time, we're anticipating is about what we'll get. Of course, gas prices are volatile. It can always go higher. It can go lower as well. But we're thinking that right now the 4% seems reasonable. The long-term commodity prospect is that rates are stable commodity-wise about where they're at today. Reserves-wise, we're holding right about target level with this rate increase projection. So that's comforting. And as Lisa brought up earlier, we do have a couple of administrative nature transfers in here, $3 million from the operations reserve to CIP to help fund those projects. We also have a proposed transfer of up to $2.766 million from the rate stabilization reserve to operations reserve. It's been our long run goal to essentially take everything out of the rate stabilization reserve and just move it to operations. And this year we're going to finally make that completely happen. So this recommendation is for a 6% distribution rate increase, which will end up being a 4% overall. And with that, I look forward to any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Council members. I guess I'll jump in first. So I know undergrounding has always been expensive, but we're saying that costs are increasing substantially. So what's driving that? But why is undergrounding costs increasing? Yeah.
In general, just the cost of, it seems to be a fewer pool of, or a smaller pool of contracting companies willing to get in and do the work. There's a lot of demand right now, just industry-wide, between gas, water, wastewater, pretty much name a utility industry, as they're all looking at infrastructure as being the focus. So there's plenty of work, and they can be picky about what they want to work on. And I think we've noticed that bids coming in for projects still continue to remain high. And at this point in time, it doesn't look like anything's coming down. We know that there are also supply chain issues making materials a little harder to get, which, makes it, if you want to get something, it's more expensive to procure faster.
Okay. And again, it's maybe a little bit off topic, but has there been much discussion about kind of what the long-term plan is for the?
It is something that we are actively discussing internally to try and see what the pace of long-term work that we want to do between capital replacement and operations and maintenance. I mean, one of the important things to remember is that even as if you're, quote, winding down the gas utility, you still have to do all of the operations and maintenance work out there to keep the system safe and operational for those using it. So there'll still be a significant, cost ongoing to keep maintaining, even as we pare down customers. But that is something that we are actively looking at along in the SCAP process.
Yeah, it seems like if we talk about grid modernization, that's where you can really only save costs if you could shut down like a part of the city, right? Where nobody's using gas there. If you have a few customers, you still have to maintain everything.
Yeah, these are things that we're all looking into and seeing if there's target areas which would work better, as replacement. Can we get everyone on a particular line to say yes to going all electric, pairing off portions of the system?
It's not possible to use any of the capital reserves for gas to move to electrification or to incentivize electrification.
I don't think capital improvement, we want to just keep that for capital improvement. We do have on the gas side, we collect money from the sale of cap and trade allowances. And today, we know in the past, we've had a hard time finding places to direct that money, but in recent years, we've gotten good guidance from the Air Resources Board that electrification is a valid use of those funds to help, push those projects along. Before there was it was kind of sticky as feeling whether or not we could spend gas money to something that promotes electric essentially, but they greenlit that. So as long as it results in carbon reduction, it's good to go. So.
Okay, cool. Eric?
Thanks. I had a question on actually one of the slides that you didn't project, but looks like there's from fiscal 2018 to 23, gas operations costs grew a lot faster than from 23 to 27. I'm curious why that was.
Let's see, are you talking about
slide 7, if you got it.
Slide 7, right?
Yeah. Why is that?
I'm trying to jog my memory exactly as to why we had such a big jump between 18 and 23.
Yeah.
I must admit, I'm drawing a blank immediately, so I would have to get back to you on that one, unfortunately.
Okay.
So, thank you, Dave. Dave Yoon mentioned that we do have the gas crossbar project, which has come in. So that is coming out of operations costs. So how could I forget that? It's a major one. So.
Okay. Cool.
And Lydia, do you have any questions?
Oh, I just want to firm up, the cross-bore is basically changing the pipes that are PVC to PEs?
Crossbore is related to when we're putting in new gas services. They'll use an underground boring device. And sometimes in certain cases, it will go through clay pipe, which was what used to be used for sewer services. So we're now investigating sewer lines for any of these gas crossbores. And because the gas fund did it, it's paying for the cost of these investigations.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
That's it.
And Eric, did you have another question or you just left your hand up? Okay.
Nope. Yeah, sorry.
Could we get there's no more questions, I guess, get a motion on the gas rates.
Move staff recommendation.
And I'll second. And I'll vote yes. Lydia
Yes.
and Eric.
Yes.
Okay. And then the last utility is electric.
So I'll start right on the proposal screen. So again, the proposal that we're bringing to you tonight for FY23 is no different than what we showed you in the preliminary, so 5%. One of the important things to note is that starting April 1st, we implemented the hydro rate adjuster, which was a 1.3 cents or 1.3 cents per kilowatt hour. This is to help defray the higher costs that we're seeing because of the drought, as most of our electricity purchases come through hydroelectric, and we're just not getting much of that anymore. That's the charge we put in there to help defray against those additional costs. And should you wish, I've got the bill insert that we've sent out to all customers, letting them know about with great information on what this charge is and what it goes towards. In the future, going forward, one of the things that we've done and one slight change that we did in future years from what you saw in the prelim is that we have taken a look at trying to quantify or at least put in some additional cost related to electrification measures that we're going to start seeing. So right now, our initial projections were on the order of say $150 million over the course of 10 years. And if we were to start trying to fund that in 2025, we'd be looking at say, if we're tentative estimate of say $350 million bonds, what would that do to our cost profile? And so what we've done is we've updated our projections. It doesn't have any effect on the 2023 proposal, but for 2024 and onward, we've taken it from being a 5% steady state increase, and all the out years now become 6%. And that's to cover those additional bond related costs that we're expecting to see. One of the other big things to note in this financial plan is that, again, because we're seeing such poor hydro conditions, we're anticipating pulling almost all funds out of the hydro stabilization reserve to help cover the higher purchase costs. We may, depending on how things settle out, we may need to pull some additional funds from the special project reserve as well to keep the operations reserve within the min-max range. So let me quickly go to I don't know what it did that. Sorry about that. My apologies. All right, so as I mentioned to you verbally, you can see here the change of taking rates on all future years from 5% to 6%. We've got a very large cost increase that we're expecting on seeing. If you look at the operations costs, know that we're short line crews and we need to go out and get contract crews to help supplement the additional work we're doing. We know that we've got a lot of capital improvement work coming in just for, like, say, wildfire mitigation up in foothills, power line replacements, power pole replacements, as well as I said, grid modernization starts out there in 2026. That little red line that you see up above the black, that's the additional bond-related costs that we're anticipating seeing. It's about on the order of about $3.5 million a year when we start floating a $50 million bond. But in order to cover this from rates, about a 6% rate increase starting in 2024 should cover it and maintain us through the forecast period. All told, because we're bringing out money from the hydro stabilization reserve into the operating reserves, you'll see an initial bump up in 2022, 23 as we're taking that money out. So we'll go up above target, but we rapidly start depleting that and drop down below target. But the goal of this is to help maintain reserves, and the additional money that we're getting, as long as we are in drought conditions and as long as the hydro rate stabilization reserves remain below minimum, we'll be recommending that the hydro rate adjuster stays in effect. Should water conditions get better, reservoir conditions get better, we may be able to drop that down to the second level, which is 0.75 cents, but 0.65 cents rather. But for right now, the 1.3 cents looks like it's where it needs to be at. As I said, hydro conditions continue to be horrible. And even though we had a little bit of rain today and may get some through the rest of the week, it's not going to be enough to make up the deficits that we have. Our reserve adequacies, we're doing fine for the risk assessment levels with regards to our operations reserve. And distribution reserve levels with this ongoing rate projection are looking to remain right about at target levels. So with that, I will go to the very long string of recommendations. My apologies, it's 2 pages worth. And I will not read it all out, if that's okay. I shall if you wish, but yeah, just noting that we've got the financial plan, several transfers this year from hydro stabilization and ESP. We are also, I want to call out that we would like to recommend making an administrative change to the special projects reserve terms in the reserves management practices. Currently, if we don't designate all usage of funds by the end of this fiscal year, they would all revert back to the operating reserve. We'd like to extend that out to be till the end of we have to commit funds by the end of 23 and then close it out by 27 instead. So, and that's the other major change. Everything else are all changes to rate schedules. So with that, I look forward to any questions you may have.
There's a lot to digest there. And when you went through these slides, so the slides here had option 1, option 2.
Yes, option 1 and option 2. So the option 1 was the original 5% proposal that we had, and that was prior to having any expectations of or putting in any of the SCAP related, the $150 million in the outer years. So from there, you can see the difference that we had between our original proposal and then what we shifted to for the out years. So as I said, FY23, no change. And that's what gets approved and adopted right now. But for the future years, just to show you that we are taking these significant costs into consideration, that it will adjust the out years as well.
So I'm sorry, option 2 here is for grid modernization?
Option 2, even more confusing. Option 2 was if we did not implement the hydro rate adjuster, what we would end up having to do to try and keep rates afloat. And so instead of a 5%, we were going to go for an 8%. The option became moot because we were able to implement the hydro rate adjuster. And so, yes.
And none of these include the cost for upgrading the grid.
So those 2 scenarios do not include the cost for upgrading the grid, no.
Okay. Could you show the scenario that you showed again?
Sure, definitely. And I'll make sure that these might be in the backup, so I will make sure these slides get forwarded to you.
Yeah, these are
Yes.
different. Yeah, so the grid modernization debt on this slide is that's what we had currently planned, but
That's what we have currently planned, yes.
okay.
So projects wouldn't start until about 2025. But we can delay when we say they might start even 2024, but there can be a slight delay between when we start paying for bond costs in relation to when we get the money. So we're anticipating that payments would start in 2025.
And are we continuing to see a
2026
decrease in electricity itself?
Hmm?
Are we continuing to see a decrease in electricity supply itself? Didn't we see some decreases? The actual generation.
I mean, we've seen a decrease in the amount of hydro that we're getting, but we're going out to market and part of the reason why we're having the higher cost is we have to go out to market to procure our needed generation. So.
Okay, Eric or Lydia, do you guys have questions?
Yeah, if I can ask one. On this chart, what were your assumptions about sort of availability and cost of hydro out in the next 5 years relative to this year?
So in general, how we tend to forecast is that for the immediate data that we get, so say for 22, 23, we're obviously expecting very low hydro, poor generation.
Yep.
Going out years, we expect, it starts to trend back to some sense of normal or come back towards normal. However, as could be guessed, if we continue to see poor hydro conditions and then rates would need to go up. Instead of having a hydro rate adjuster active to deal with the higher costs of electricity that we're seeing, we would end up increasing the supply rates to make up for the additional costs that are now part of the norm per se.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so then sort of the two questions or the one bracket question. If next year goes back to being a normal year for water supply in California, what happens to the 6% per year in the out years? And alternatively, if next year and the year after stay just like they were this year, what happens to those 6%?
So if it stays right now equally as dry and costs remain high, yeah.
So do those stay 6% or they go up to 6 or 7 or 8%?
They might. So if things continue to be dry, then those sixes may become 7 or 8%. That's entirely reasonable to assume moving forward.
And if things get wet again, if we have a couple of normal years, then do they go down to 5% or 2% or?
So initially, I mean, if they got wet and stayed wet, we can hope. Yeah, it's possible then the electric commodity cost would come down. And initially we'd honestly take some of the savings we have and use that to replenish the hydro stabilization reserve. But then if it was maintaining, then yes, we could reduce some of those rate increases.
But like a little bit or a lot? I'm just sort of trying to get an idea of the magnitude of the spread here.
Well, I think if you look at it, where we're at, say, take another wet year, say 2017 or 2020, very good years when we had a lot of hydro generation. So, it could drop it down by, hydro can have a swing of $10 to $15 million a year in our portfolio. So, yeah.
Okay. And 10 or 15. Well, that doesn't sound like much. Okay, so the total is 200 million. So a 10 or 15 million swing is, 7 or 8% or something like that. So that's the range.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Well, pray for rain. Okay, thanks.
So back to the grid modernization. So if I was reading this right, you know, you guys were talking about $150 million in projects with potentially three $50 million bonds. And when it really gets started until 2025, I mean, are we basically saying there's no way we're going to make our SCAP goal by 2030? If I read this right. I mean, it's pretty clear, right? It's just,
Chair Du Bois, yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I think it's going to be very difficult for us to, to meet and get to 2030.
Yeah.
If we're not going to start until 24, 25 with grid modernization,
Yeah.
it's going to be very difficult for us to, to rebuild that and move forward within 5 years.
so again, the grid modernization debt that's showing up in 26, 27 on here,
Yes,
is that from those bonds?
that would be from the loan that we would have to bond that money out of. That 1%, that extra point that we talked about before when we first came to you, we showed fives. You asked the question, is there any future percentage rate increases for electrification? And we said no. And so we went back and looked at the modeling portion of it. That's
Yeah,
why
so it is included in here
it's included
now.
in that 6, yes.
But to Councilmember Philsett's point, if we have a couple more bad years of drought, it sounds like we got a double whammy with electricity and water and potentially trying to do this electrification.
Right. Yes, that would be correct.
Okay, I mean, I guess questions like how bad could it get?
I think that, we could possibly see 8s to 10s in those outer years, depending on, we get out to 26, 27 and the drought stays the way that we are. We'll probably see very little hydro then at that point. And then we'd have to buy off market then at that period of time.
So is everybody trying to find alternate sources right now?
We're looking right now at ways that we can utilize some of the contracts that we have. And then we're also looking for new ways of looking in for other power.
But is everybody else doing that at the same time or?
I'm not sure if everybody is from, talking to folks at NCPA. We're a large customer for hydro, where the rest are not as tied so much into hydro. Santa Clara's got their own peaker, so they produce their own energy. Santa Rosa has their own generation plant with that. So they're not so much tied into hydro as much as we are.
Yeah, so what is our longer term plan? Like, is it more, I mean, you can't use more solar at some point, you need a backup, right?
We can look for more solar. The other thing that we're also looking at is we're looking at wind coming up out of the north, up northwest, bringing it down. So we're looking at that. We also think that maybe more solar coming out of the south as well.
Although if if we have more dry years and hydro becomes hard to get, then are there scenarios in which we go back and start buying brown power?
Yeah, Commissioner Philseff, we haven't looked at that yet. I guess that would be an option if we wanted to.
Solar doesn't run at night, right? So.
Right, but some of the large solar portions of it has some battery portions of it. So the way that they build the bigger plant portions of it, but we have not looked at if we'd have to go back to brown.
But some of the solar suppliers do have
Storage.
the storage to shift it in time.
Yes.
All right, so we're seeing that, huh? Okay.
Council, Vice Mayor Ku, did you have any questions?
Just, I'm trying to understand, why are customer sales declining? I mean, it says in the report that it's declined by 1.5% to 2% over the past several years annually. Why is that when when most people are transitioning to electric?
In short, efficiency. As we're putting more electricity on the grid, but the appliances keep getting better. We do a lot better about how we, minding the lights. We put in LEDs. Appliance efficiency is just so much better. We're adding more devices. We're getting more people on, but we continually just see the loads staying level and falling. So it's recently, of course, COVID. If you want to blame that fund, the declines have been mainly in the commercial sector as offices have yet to reach full vacancy. But no, efficiency for all sectors has just been spectacular. But yes, what it does is that we still continue to see declines in usage over time. So.
Yeah, so it's like it's good news that all these things are so efficient. At the same time, the cost of maintenance, capital investment, all of that is continuing to go up. So, and then so in hydro, we have that big contract on hydro. Remind me, is there no way to, when does it expire? Does it ever expire? Can we get out of it?
For the Western contract, does that expire 25 or 26, 25, 26?
25, 26.
We don't incur costs unless we buy the power, right?
Right, we don't incur any of the costs unless we buy any power. Vice Mayor Ku, also too, is that we were coming to council here. Sorry, I don't know the date offhand, but we are going to bring the preliminary report on that Western contract to the council.
Okay.
Because there are some jumping off in the past. That used to be a 30-year contract. And with the new agreements that are going to be in place, anytime that Western increases their rates, there's a jumping off point that we can decline some of our portions of the hydro, or we can keep it. It's in a 5-year period of time. So that will also be explained in the report portion of it, but there are going to be jumping off points for us as we move forward with this Western contract.
Okay. Well, thanks for that.
Can I ask a couple more questions on the solar thing? So is there a price difference between, solar in the daytime and solar in the evening, like battery enabled solar? If we buy it?
I do not know the answer to that myself.
I don't know, Eric. It's something that we can get back to you with on that.
So somebody must have to pay for the cost of storage somewhere. Right?
Well, I think that the storage is part of the cost of your project.
Right.
And so upfront costs are covered for that storage, but I don't believe there's a cost difference from day and night.
Okay, so then presumably electricity from a project that doesn't have any storage is a little bit cheaper than from a project that does have some storage?
That's correct. Yes.
But how much is the difference?
That I don't know. That part I'll have to get back to you on.
And do you guys see a scenario in which CPAU ends up with a certain amount of time shifting storage?
I could see that. I could see that because it's something that we're looking at as an option as we move forward into these new contracts. That would give us some opportunities to get some of that off-peak power.
Right. I mean, I'm just thinking as we keep having these years where the hydro gets years where hydro is scarce seem to be becoming more common, right? And so as we move through that, are you guys looking at that? I guess that's the question. Because what's the long-term replacement for hydro if in fact the drought is the new normal?
As I explained to Chair Boyce, one of the things that we're also, like I said, we're looking heavy into is the wind coming up out of the north Pacific West.
Right.
We don't have a whole lot of wind in our portfolio,
Okay.
so it's something that we're going to look at, and we're looking at that today.
And is the periodicity of wind different? We're more likely to get it at night than we are solar. I guess everything's more likely than solar at night. Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
So
All right.
just some questions on the motion itself, which is one of the longer ones I've seen. So was the ESP reserve meant to be like a short-term reserve, and that's why we have to extend the dates on it?
So the Special Projects Reserve was originally set up it was the Calaveras replacement project reserve way back in the day, but we set aside the pool of money to be used for essentially projects which we would otherwise say bond finance, that we could pull from that pool of funds, short one, either one-time large projects, and we could utilize that, or for things of short-term scope. So say, for instance, right now we're using the Special Projects Reserve to fund the Smart Grid project. We may look at utilizing it for wildfire mitigation up in the hills. We still have some money left over in it. If we use those funds, historically, if we've used those funds for anything other than these sort of designated big projects, and we have taken a loan from that, and then with the intent that we pay it back to the fund. So right now we would, in this plan, we would start paying it back starting in 25, I believe, start repaying any loans that we take for that. We were planning on trying to refund some of that money, pay back existing loans that we've had in the past, but with COVID, with drought, it felt like taking money out of the operations fund and going to repay the ESP reserve was not the best course of action. So it's all still the electric fund money. We just like to correctly represent where, what we want to set aside for projects versus day-to-day operations. And so that's why we consider it a loan. But that's sort of the purpose of that reserve.
Right. But the idea of changing these end dates, did it have an end of life on it?
Just so that we didn't, if we don't change the dates, then under the current terms of it, everything in the Special Projects Reserve would dump into the Operations Reserve at the end of this year.
Okay.
And we didn't feel that was the best use of those funds. So in reality, what would it do is it would take the Operations Reserve, drive it up above maximum, but then we'd probably request that we set aside money in capital projects or for some future fund and really put it almost exactly where it's at today. But
and then all the net surplus and the Palo Alto Green program changes, those are just, again, to meet the current cost of.
The changes to the net energy metering compensation rates and the green costs, those we use to reflect the actual costs. So for the net energy metering ones, those are based on avoided cost. For the green power, that's based on our actual admin and cost to procure product. So.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks to all the staff for all the reviews today. I'll go ahead and move the staff motion on the electric changes.
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure, Lydia.
Thank you. So I wanted to find out if all of these, the next step is that it goes to council on the consent calendar, correct?
No, rates are not a consent item. We'll have it go through. It'll be a public hearing night along with the budget. So, but the only thing is that, so it'll be heard, it'll be discussed in front of council. We have a short presentation. The electric and gas and we'll also have changes to storm drain and fiber optic as well. Those can be voted on by council. The ones that are true public hearing are the water and wastewater, where we will have a count of the number of votes in protest against that.
Okay.
But all those will be done that night.
Okay, so it's just the water and the wastewater that would be having the opportunity of protests, and that is due to council or to the clerk by when?
Those can be turned into the clerk at the night of the, as late as the night of the meeting.
Okay, all right. Do you send out the instructions for protests along with the proposed rate increases in the utility bills?
The proposed, as we call it, the Prop 218 notice, that actually is ready and sent to go out if, as of tonight, since they were voted upon and passed, we've got those already drafted up and at the printer, and we will send those out probably within the next week or two, because we have to send those letters out 45 days prior, at least 45 days prior to the council date.
Okay.
So yeah, those are all set and ready to roll out quickly.
Okay, thank you. I'm ready to vote.
Okay, so let's go ahead and vote on the
Can I speak to my second for like 1 second?
Sure.
Which is, it's not really on my second, but for a variety of reasons, there's been some discussion between the city and Tesla on a variety of topics in the last couple of weeks. But, one of the effects was, we all started looking at this project that they did in Elkhorn Slough, where they've got with PG&E, where they got 180 megawatts of battery storage for a 4-hour time shift, right? And we go, whoa, that's a lot. So just a thought as we think through our sort of long-term baseload strategy and so forth. Maybe, they're here in town, so this is, might be something worth taking a look at some point or other. That's all. I vote yes.
Thank you. Lydia, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well.
Thank you for the work and the presentation.
Thank you.
Yep. It's always educational. So that ends our action items. The other last item was upcoming agendas, right?
Yes, thank you, Chair Du Bois. Excuse me. Our next meeting is scheduled for May 3rd at 5:30. This will be more rates for the stormwater fees. And then also we're anticipating a fee study coming back. Following that meeting, the immediate next week, we will be having our budget meetings, which will be daytime meetings from about 9 a.m. to 5 or 5:30 or so. Those are calendared for May 10th and 11th. With an additional meeting on May 17th, pending some additional fee study statuses. So it'll be a busy month coming up, probably about 4 to 5 meetings with the committee, both between budget and just regular agenda items.
And then wrap up on the 24th. Right?
Correct. Wrap up is currently scheduled for May 24th. That one would start in the afternoon as opposed to an all-day time. We typically try and start those around 12 or 1.
Great. And you told me before the meeting started, we'll be getting the preliminary budget hopefully end of next week.
Correct. So the preliminary budget will be released by the end of this month. We're tentatively expecting it to come out either the 28th or the 29th of April. And then we helpful direction to this committee for your deliberations coming on May 10th.
Great. Okay. We'll be busy. So thank you.
You will be very busy for the next month. Thank you all in advance.
Yep. And I think with that, meeting adjourned. So, thank you.
Thank you.